Do you remember that sense of excitement that washed over you when you came across a television program that seemed specifically made for you? Or the joy of tuning into something that was absolutely original and did not conform to the typical TV shows of the time? Well, if you do, then chances are you were a 70s kid, and you got to experience some of the most insane variety of bold, strangely innovative, and weird TV shows to ever hit the air. With shows that were ahead of their time, the 1970s was one hell of a ride, and honestly, we're glad to have experienced it. So join us as we step into our own time machine and rediscover some of the most insane lost TV gems of the 1970s and the shows that shaped the era in ways we never knew. Quark, 1977 to 1978. Okay, even among 70s kids, not everyone got to enjoy the madness that is Quark. To put it simply, this was one of those rare shows that few people saw, but anyone who was fortunate enough to catch even a single episode will always remember it. From the comedy to the premise and just how much it makes Star Trek look dumb, this show mastered the art of being memorable. Debuting in 1977 and sadly leaving in 1978, it was a science fiction sitcom that parodied, among other things, Star Trek and Star Wars. The premise of this outlandish show revolved around a space garbage scow led by Adam Quark, played by the talented Richard Benjamin, who surprisingly was not the heroic captain. Nope, our main protagonist had to clean up the mess in space. And if you think that's weird, then you clearly haven't met his crew. I mean, the crew was just as crazy as the ship. The Bettys, for example, were identical twin navigators who were clones of each other. Now, you would think that would mean they are completely in sync. Wrong. These ladies created enough comedic tension to make you choke on your space food stick. Then there was Jean, or Jean, who was a transmute who could interject themselves as exclusively male or female. As you already expected, this led to a lot of humorous situations. Then there was a serious man, Ficus Pandorata, the plant man science officer, who presented a Spock-like, emotionless perspective to the crew. And just when you think it can't get any stranger, the show introduced us to Andy the robot, a neurotic and cowardly machine who made you laugh more than any human. The show was a short-lived masterpiece of cheeky satire, giving us episodes like Poo Poo, which was a parody of the Star Wars saga. It even tossed in a psychic source who sounded more like your whiny cousin than a galactic force. One episode had a giant space chicken. Another had Ficus doing a pollination dance with a giant alien insect. All it took was one episode, and you immediately knew Quark was not intended to be taken at all seriously. Though it only lasted 8 episodes, Quark enjoyed a second life as a cult classic and is fondly remembered by those fortunate enough to have seen it during its short run. It was a weird, wild show that embraced the quirky mindset of the 1970s. And provided a weird, wonderful, and unforgettable trip to outer space. The Girl with Something Extra, 1973 to 1974. Okay, so if that theme song meant anything to you, then you definitely experienced one of the best shows to ever air in the 70s. Although not everyone got to experience it, The Girl with Something Extra was a wild and kooky 1973 show that caught the attention of everyone who saw it with its insane what-if concept. I mean, on the surface, it seemed like a simple show about newlyweds John and Sally Burton, played by the winsome John Davidson and ever-bubbly Sally Field. But that was just the beginning, because to make it interesting, Sally could read minds. And in case you were wondering, yes, she goes on to create a lot of fun and uncomfortable situations. Who could forget the pilot episode, Sally on My Mind, where Sally drops the bombshell about her powers on their wedding night? It was classic 70s sitcom gold, with that awkward, innocent charm we all loved back then. And then there was also the episode Everything You Wanted to Hide and Couldn't, where Sally catches John fantasizing about other women. Oh boy, John was in for a hell of a day. The premise was pure 70s fantasy sitcom goodness. I mean, people gathered to watch John Burton freak out over his new wife's mind-reading ability, and let's be honest, who wouldn't? The show was a mix of marital comedy and supernatural happenings, and the connection between Sally and John was the center of it all. But that wasn't everything, because the show was also riddled with amazing side characters like Zora Lampert as Anne, Jack Sheldon as Jerry, Henry Jones as Owen, and Terry Garr as Amber. These stars brought some real character depth to the show. And let's not forget Diane Ewing as Linda Fowler. Honestly, there was so much talent crammed into one show. For anyone who watched it, The Girl with Something Extra was a show like no other. But that was the whole point. Today, many people could say the show was a flash in the pan. But for those who watched it, it's like finding an old toy in the attic. You pick it up, and you're instantly transported back to those groovy, carefree days. Sadly, the show was short-lived, and only 22 episodes aired between September 1973 and March 1974 before it faded into TV history. But hey, at least we know what kind of crazy antics come with marrying a hot psychic. Project U.F.O, 1978 to 1979. Hold on to your tinfoil hat, because this was a show so good that by Men in Black logic, the government had to wipe our memory of it. But don't worry, this will jog your memory. Project U.F.O was a show that really takes you back to the heart of the 1970s. It ran from 1978 to 1979, but let me tell you, it was so good that if it came back to air on Sunday nights again, you would be glued to your TV set. But what made this show stand out? Well, it wasn't your typical flying saucer drama. No. It had a unique, almost serious approach to the whole UFO thing. You see, it was based on the real-life Project Blue Book, this U.S. Air Force investigation into UFO sightings. But what made it truly memorable were the episodes, because each one felt like a real UFO case, like it was an actual government mission. And why wouldn't it? You had Major Jake Gatlin, played by William Jordan, leading the charge. And then there was Staff Sergeant Harry Fitz, played by Casky Swain, always by his side doing the grunt work. The show was produced by none other than Jack Webb, the same guy behind Dragnet, so you could imagine it had that same no-nonsense procedural vibe. You weren't just watching a sci-fi show, you were watching these folks chase down UFOs like they were solving a real mystery. I mean, in one episode, a glowing UFO hovers over a 10-year-old girl played by 70s kid star Pamela Ferdin on a beach, beaming her a message tied to a signal Earth sent 15 years back. In another, school kids spot a UFO near a nuclear plant, and one boy's dad, played by Bonanza's Pernell Roberts, gets tangled in the fallout. But perhaps the best episode was the pilot episode, because it didn't even give you time to adjust. It just kicks off with a bang. An Air Force pilot crashes chasing a UFO over D.C., while a Virginia woman, played by Ann Sheedon, swears a robot thing grabs soil samples from a hovering craft. Come on, that is TV gold right there. Sure, the show only lasted 2 seasons, but for a lot of people back then, it was a weekly ritual. The theme song would get stuck in your head for days, and you'd always find yourself wondering, just like the characters, what if it is real? It was the perfect mix of skepticism and wonder that everyone had back then about UFOs, government secrets, and just what was going on up there in the sky. The Magician, 1973 through 1974. If you ever wondered what it would be like for David Copperfield to become Batman, well, this show had the answer. For those who didn't blink and caught it, The Magician was a nostalgic experience of magic combined with suspenseful problem-solving. Starring Bill Bixby as Anthony Tony Blake, a stage magician turned sleuth. It brought magic and adventure into the living rooms of audiences. Can you imagine getting home from school on Thursday night to watch Bixby create breathtaking illusions, always reminding us that there were no special effects, only magic? I mean, this man levitated a lady while robbers hit the safe below. And if that's not crazy enough, the magic was only one part of the show. The other was pure insane plots. Who could forget when someone was trying to kill Max and Tony dived into a casino underworld to face off with a boozy gambler? Or the time his Vegas singer pal Julie, played by Susan Blanchard, gets kidnapped mid-act and he tracks her down with a slick vanishing act of his own. This was a show where the main character lived in a tricked-out Boeing 720 jet called the Spirit and drove his Corvette right up the ramp. If that didn't scream badass in the 70s, then nothing did. Every episode was an exciting mix of mystery, magic, and teamwork, and Blake's compassion made him the ultimate hero. not to mention his knack for solving complex cases using his magical expertise and his stellar crew. Keen Curtis as Max Pomeroy, the wise columnist, Jim Watkins as Jerry Anderson, the ever-faithful pilot, and later, Joseph Sorolla as Dominic, the badass sidekick. This show was bound to keep you invested. Sadly, The Magician only lasted one season, but somehow, in that time, it became a cherished memory for many, leaving a legacy that would inspire future shows like The X-Files and Quantum Leap, and forever reminding fans of that magical feeling of watching a hero solve mysteries with the wave of a hand. The San Pedro Beach Bums, 1977. So this was a strange one. The San Pedro Beach Bums was a breezy, feel-good sitcom that somehow managed to bottle the carefree spirit of the late 70s, Southern California. Revolving around 5 lovable misfits, Buddy, Stuff, Dancer, Moose, and Boy Chick, who lived together on a dock houseboat named Our Boat in San Pedro. Weird names aside, the show followed their sun-soaked adventures and bumbling antics as they chased odd jobs, romance, and good times. Their brotherly bond and quirky personalities made every episode a warm, laughter-filled ride. But beyond it all, what really made this show a classic was just the fact that they were relatable, and the show was just so funny. Buddy, played by Christopher Murney, was the confident, fast-talking leader. Stuff, played by Stuart Pankin, brought brains and gourmet flair. Dancer, played by John Mark Robinson, jittered with neurotic energy. Moose, played by Daryl McCullough, was the big-hearted, gentle giant. And everyone's favorite, Boy Chick, played by Chris DeRose, played the smooth-talking ladies' man. I mean, off the bat, you knew something about the show was unique. In the very first episode, The Angels and the Bums, Charlie's Angels Kate Jackson, Jacqueline Smith, and Cheryl Ladd crashed the Bums' world to save the Miss Harbor Beauty Contest. And as if that was not insane enough, in another episode, the Bums coached a kids' football team against a bunch of dirty playing punks, with Frank Gifford, the Monday Night Football legend, playing a coach. This show was the embodiment of peak 70s crossover madness, and everyone who saw it loved it. Though short-lived, the show left behind a nostalgic echo of friendship, freedom, and California dreamin' served up with a side of upbeat theme song and Surfside opening credits. When Things Were Rotten, 1975. Okay, this one is really niche. Weird name aside, When Things Were Rotten was superbad filmmaker Mel Brooks' zany, irreverent take on the Robin Hood legend. Presented as a sitcom bursting with absurdity that aired on ABC for just 13 episodes. The series was loaded with slapstick humor, puns, and anachronisms that were so good they would become Brooks' selling point for the Robin Hood Men in Tights feature film he would later make. Dick Gautier played Robin Hood as a lovable, clueless leader surrounded by his dysfunctional Merry Men cast. Dick Van Patten played Friar Tuck, a jolly sidekick with more appetite than wisdom. Bernie Kopel's Alan Adale doubled as a minstrel and occasional narrator, often breaking the fourth wall. Misty Rose Maid Marian brought charm and cleverness, while Henry Pollock II's Sheriff of Nottingham and Ron Rifkin's Prince John brought bumbling villainy to every scene. The show's humor leaned into visual gags and modern-day references dropped into medieval England, creating a fast-paced, anything-goes tone. Whether it was exaggerated sword fights or deliberately cheesy sets, it felt like a live action cartoon with a wink at the audience. In the first episode, Robin was caught by the sheriff, and the Merry Men wore conga outfits to bust him out of a dungeon. In another episode, Dudley Moore, as a sheik, tried to wed Marian, and Robin had to outwit him with olive oil gags and a wizard played by Steve Landensberg. Though short-lived, When Things Were Rotten managed to carve a cult following and remains a nostalgic gem for fans of Mel Brooks' offbeat comedic genius. Also, it was just fun to see a bumbling Robin. Okay, now it's time for some honorable mentions. First up, we have Tabitha, a show that had big shoes to fill and tried to bring the magic back. Portrayed by Lisa Hartman, the young single witch Tabitha, even with its bewitched connection, sadly fizzled out after one season. Honestly, the show was a what-could-have-been moment. Then there was Making It, where David Naughton hit the dance floor in New Jersey with a catchy disco theme. It should have been a hit, but sadly it only lasted 9 episodes. And who could forget Hot Eye Baltimore, the 1975 show that was ahead of its time with a mix of quirky hotel residents, including a gay couple and even a prostitute. Too bold for the 70s, it only lasted just 13 episodes. There was also Quinn Martin's Tales of the Unexpected, which promised horror and wild twists. Amazing show, yes, but sadly, one of its wild twists was its disappearance after 8 episodes. It didn't even have enough time to make us scared. Then there was the 1978-1979 tribute show, Hee Haw Honeys. This was a show that tried to capture that country diner vibe, but despite its musical guests, it got canceled after 24 episodes. How many of these shows do you remember? Or did one of them just bring you back to a memory you've not thought of in 40 years? From quirky sci-fi sitcoms to supernatural antics and laughable misfits, the 70s were loaded with ghosts of forgotten shows that are worth remembering. These classics never really became household names, but they are classics nevertheless. So it's your turn. Which of these shows brought back the most memories? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. And if you love going back to the past, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more blasts from the past. Until next time, stay nostalgic.